whether we're going to give in to all of those imperfections or whether we're going to succeed in living for God. And that creates kind of a dichotomy in our lives. This morning we're going to hear about three young men, as we learned them in Sunday school: Shadrach, Meshach, and into bed we go. No, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. We're going to learn about their faithfulness along with their friend Daniel. But before we do that, I want to have us take a look at a very brief video. Click in the middle of that screen. You got to slide all the way over. Like anybody's life? Now, I'm not asking for confessions this morning, but I think we all have those times when we've put on our best behavior on the outside, we've put on our brightest face, we've put on our new clothes, all in attempts to cover up all the garbage that's on the inside, right? Clean it all up so that nobody notices all the little things on the inside. As Tony said, the big picture in this story, the entire book of Daniel, isn't just three outstanding young men and their best friend, but it's the consistency in their lives. They cleaned it up on the outside, but they were also cleaned up on the inside. And for them, the message was one of integrity. I know the rules of God. I know his commands. I know his statutes. I know his law. I know who God is. And I have committed myself to living by his grace and his alone. Now, that's all well and good until, as they say, the rubber meets the road. Until you've got a king that is breathing death in your direction. Until you are faced with the consequences of your commitment and your actions. And then we begin the justification process, right? Not the justification process that God does when he makes our lives new, sanctified, and holy. But the justification process that we commit when we say, well, how bad could it be just to bend a little bit and look up? How bad could it really be to give the king the honor that he's due? You know, after all, God always said we should honor our leaders. So if he thinks he's king, if the king thinks that he's God, well, then that's on him. That's not on me. I guess I can just bow down a little bit. But Daniel, Shadrach, and Meshach, and Abednego said no. They took a courageous stance. And the most courageous stance is that when the times got tough, they stayed with it. They were consistent. Their character was such that it didn't allow them to say one thing out in public and then do another thing in private. And so when they went back to their rooms and they knew that there were things that they should eat and shouldn't eat, it would have been very easy to go back to their rooms and in the privacy of their room be able to eat all of the things that everyone else was doing. But they didn't. They weren't followers. Well, they were, but they only followed one. And that was God himself. I think it's interesting that in the Bible, God makes a lot of name changes. And in here, Nebuchadnezzar changes all of their names, and he gives them Babylonian names. And I looked and I looked and I looked, and I could not find the meaning of these Babylonian names. And maybe that's the point of all of it. Those have been lost. But one of those that had his name changed was Daniel. And Daniel's name the other way, that God was with us. God was for us. Daniel lived his name. He was the witness that God has been striving for. Remember, God wanted Israel and Judah to be his witnesses, to share his message, to let people see them, and in seeing them, would know what God's plan was all about. You ever tried to witness to somebody about God? Tell them all about this person that you know, can't see, can't hear, can't touch, but you know them. Well, Daniel knew that part of his role was to put hands and feet to who God is. In other words, put his plan into motion. Much like Wayne does with the Gideons. Tries to put that word into motion. Puts it in places where people are going to see it. Or as Paul, the apostle, says, be imitators of me. Now that's a pretty bold statement. Not many of us want people to look at us and be imitators of us. I remember a while back, a big controversy in pro sports. One of those that was the brightest light and probably one of the worst role models you could have. Proclaimed very loudly to the world and anybody that would listen in the media that it wasn't his role to be a role model. All he did was play sports. And if people couldn't accept that, too bad for them. Problem was is he was a role model. You see, you don't apply to be a role model. You just are one. And you're one regardless. So when you leave this building this morning, you are a role model. When you go out and you're with friends or family at dinner, you're their role model. When you go out to a restaurant, when you go to the shopping center, where you go to work tomorrow, you're going to be a role model. The only question is are you going to be a good one? A strong one? A consistent one? Or are you going to be a bad one? Daniel and his friends chose to be a good role model. He epitomized what God was doing with the people of Israel and Judah, or wanted to. I want you to be this shining light, this city on a hill, this people that others look at and they can see what I'm all about. Daniel got it. Shadrach got it. Meshach got it. Abednego got it. And as a result, God took care of them. He said, these are people who are doing my plan. So I need to walk with them as they walk with me. Now, what our kids hear in Bible school and in Sunday school and everywhere else that we go are the really neat stories of Daniel. We saw a few of those in the video. Daniel defies the king's orders. So what happens? They throw him into the lion's den. It was actually just a large cistern where they kept lions, and they only fed them occasionally to keep them angry. And then any time that they wanted to